What we see sleeping here is a female. Metraea canthosaurus. Sunbathing, waiting for prey to come near. She is considered the queen of Isle Peña, the smallest island of the 5 deaths of Costa Rica. And as a soon-to-be mother, she must find the largest prey that she can possibly take down. However, in her conditions, she is not able to hunt down a 4-ton herbivore. Her mate, on the other hand, though, is full of energy and hasn't eaten a meal in 4 days. Though he only barely weighs a ton, he still shows his strength as a predator, taking down this 4-ton hadrosaur. Once he's finished with his shares, his mate will soon follow. Ingen brought back the Metriacanthosaurus by filling in the gaps of its DNA with hyenas, meaning the male is not the one in charge between the two, only getting a fraction of what the female will consume. However, now that food is running low, they will soon have to migrate, and where they are moving is almost an all-you-can-eat buffet. On this dry river canal leads a rock path towards a massive watering hole, one that Ingen made as a center source for hydration, for a potential wildlife resort where guests could drive around and watch the dinosaurs in their natural habitat. However, once the park shut down in 1992, all operations were ceased, and Ingen had to abandon the project. So now, all the dinosaurs roam free on the island, to roam and survive. But which dinosaurs are on this island, and why these ones in particular? Say hello to the lake's smallest residents, Pachycephalosaurus, only measuring in at 15 feet and weighing under 1,000 pounds. Pachycephalosaurus make up for it with numbers and staying next to the larger, more safer herbivores, as so is the other residents of the lake, Gigantospinosaurus, an animal that is a relative of the Stegosaurus family. As with one look, you will notice the spikes on its tail, also known as thagomizers, along with the rows of plates on its back. It more than likely used its tail to defend itself against predators from its origin point in China, like Yangchuanosaurus as an example, Amechiracanthosaurus, Ancestor. However, there is another animal with spikes that cover its body, along with lots of armor, also known as osteoderms, that patrols the lake. This is the Sauropelta, an ankylosaur, the oldest resident of the lake. With all the armor on its back, there is very few predators that can put it down, and none large enough on this island. The last one to make an attempt met an early end with a bed of spikes rammed into its stomach. And on that day, the Sauropelta was deemed as a sort of guardian to protect the lake. However, he isn't alone, as the other oldest resident, the iguanadon, has considered the lake a home for it to stay its ground. It weighs in at a whopping 3.5 tons, though not impressive for a herbivore. On this island, the iguanodon is one of the largest animals on Isle Peña. However, an achievement like that means nothing to this poor bull, when he's got no others of his kind walking around to socialize with. Gigantospinosaurus was a stegosaur from late Jurassic Pentang, China, 160 million years ago, discovered in 1985 by scientist Qiang Hui. However, it was thought to have been another species of stegosaur for a while, known as Tuozhangasaurus, until they unearthed another specimen from Fuquan the next year, and then in 2006 was dubbed the name Gigantospinosaurus, also known as the giant-spined lizard, characterized by the giant spikes on the side of its body. The air is humid, making it difficult for animals to cool off, so the Pachys decide to go swimming, due to the island being so close to the equator. It gets hot and quick, which is why these animals live next to this lake. Large water supplies means more swimming room. And more, swimming room, means more places to cool off. Other herbivores, like the sauropelta, use the shade of the plants to hide from the sunlight to cool off. The iguanodon, however, doesn't need to, as it can regulate its body temperature in order to cool off. The iguanodon has a bizarre history, as it was one of the first dinosaurs ever discovered by a scientist named Gideon Mantell, an England paleontologist, whose first findings were that of iguana-like teeth, giving the name iguanodon, or iguana tooth. However, that wasn't even the weird part. The weird part was the original reconstruction of what iguanodon was, as when scientists discovered its famous thumb claw, they initially thought it was the horn of a lizard, and so scientists reconstructed iguanodon into this bulky-looking lizard. However, as our understanding of prehistory became more clear, we reconstructed it over the next 200 years into the animal you see here today. Ingen wanted at least one animal on this island to have a unique story to tell, as iguanodon was a fascinating animal to read the history of, to help people understand the history of paleontology. So the iguanodon was named the star attraction of Isle Peña. However, Ingen never took the welfare of its lifestyle into consideration, as iguanodon would have lived in herds, as numbers were the best form of protection against predators of its time. During the early Cretaceous, 140 million years ago, our smallest residents, the Pachycephalosaurus, its fossils were discovered in 1859 in the Lance Formations in Montana, originally thought to have been some reptilian armadillo species, until 1985, when it was classified as a new genus, Pachycephalosaurus, the thick-headed lizard. However, it wasn't the only one. There were two other Pachycephalosaurid species, Dracorex and Stygimoloch, both thrown into this theory that those animals were but merely growth stages of Pachycephalosaurus. However, that question was answered in 1990, when Ingen brought back all three animals, and now there is no longer a debate. As nighttime falls, the Pachys seek one last drink of water before heading back into the grass to sleep away, in the nice, cool moisture coming off the leaves. Well, most of them at least. The sauropelta watches the Pachys walk out into the water as he's taking a drink. But as they get closer, he walks off, trying to get some privacy, as nodosaurids are not social animals in the slightest. On the contrary, the iguanodon is a highly social animal, who has shown time and time again mimicking acts the Pachys have committed. Like swimming, Ingen thought the Pachys would be perfect social animals for the iguanodon, and in a sense, they were correct. As any time the Pachys are out swimming, he will join in and play along, as a way to show he is only a gentle giant. In the dawn, the watering hole has been introduced to an uninvited guest, and an insanely dangerous one. He may look familiar to you, but rest assured, this is no Tyrannosaurus rex. This is the Albertosaurus, the largest predator of Isle Peña. This creature weighs in at 1.5 tons and is over 30 feet long, just large enough to take on the island megafauna. However, as it browses the lake, it notices easier prey, like the Chunkingosaurus on the other side of the lake. However, this apex predator has a challenger to prevent it from achieving a meal, the iguanodon being said challenger. Unfortunately for the Albertosaurus, the iguanodon has no desire to back down as it challenges him by combat. The iguanodon charges in. The herbivore has experience and size on its side for this battle. However, the Albertosaurus could take it down with a quick bite to the neck, and it's far more agile. On the other end, the iguanodon has a killer thumb claw, though used mostly for digging up plants, could easily leave serious damage on a challenger. Unfortunately, the iguanodon cannot risk getting too close to the predator's jaw, so it must resort to using its sheer body weight to push the predator off balance or to scare it off. However, too many wounds have already forced the animal to retreat, meaning the Albertosaurus has succeeded and will find prey to feast upon. Only been a week after the attack, and the iguanodon has already recovered and fully healed, giving the gaps of its DNA with an axolotl, an animal known for its ability to regenerate its body. He was lucky to survive, although if another encounter were to happen, he may not get a third chance. One week has passed since the attack of the Albertosaurus, and life for the Gigantspinosaurus has been in fear. Each member of the herd has been separate from one another, as they find it difficult to cope, losing one of their own. Because of this, it may ruin the chances of an entire second generation, as they are too frightened to even begin mating season. Ingen had this intentionally as a way for population control. With losing one member of the herd, they worry about the safety of the others, and try to isolate each other to not get so attached. Unfortunately for them, another predator is creeping close. The Metriacanthosaurus starts to get closer. Normally, they don't travel out this far. But unfortunately, as the herbivores keep migrating and the female gets closer to motherhood, they need to find food, and soon. And the male senses the smell of the lake's residents. And if their hunt is successful, it'll be an all-you-can-eat buffet. The male calls to his mate, signaling that food is nearby. As the male continues to go further in, he notices something in the bushes. Something almost rock-like, but it was moving. It's the sauropelta sleeping away the day, not even hearing the predator standing almost right next to him. And the iguanodon is just as oblivious. As the female spots him, seeing nothing more than a stable source of food that will feed her until she lays her eggs, she slowly approaches through the grasslands. However, her attempt to ambush is unsuccessful. The iguanodon spots her and understands that this is not a time to back down, not after what happened last time. He starts to slowly walk up to the female, knowing for certain conflict is inevitable. That roar, however, was not for the female. It was to wake up the sauropelta, signaling him to get up and fight. He sees the male and readies himself to fight. He rushes in, trying to scare the sauropelta away. Little does he know the grave mistake he has made, trying to be aggressive. The armor on the sauropelta allows him to take nearly every attack the male has to throw at him. The male makes a tactical retreat, hoping the female will follow suit. Unfortunately for him, his mate is in a completely separate state of mind, and that state says to take down its prey. She attempts another ambush, hoping to get a clear bite on the iguanodon's neck. Unfortunately for her, he's still on defense and on constant lookout for her, trying to scare him off as hours pass by. However, it seems like the female will have no choice but to fight it head-on. Starving and pregnant is one of the worst combinations in nature, especially when your menu can fight back, and is over 5 times your weight. However, the iguanodon strikes a deadly blow. And so, the female Metriacanthosaurus has made her final mistake. The male returns to their watering hole, hoping the female will return. He looks for her scent and tries calling out to her, trying to find her location. But he will not find a response from her at all. He is all alone, no one to be with. The iguanodon has made a recovery, and peace in the lake has been restored. And as the sun sets, he proceeds to get one more drink for the night. And as a new night has dawned, this story we have witnessed has come to a close on the island of Isle Peña. However, there are more stories to tell, with more prehistoric creatures brought to life. On our next episode of Cinco, muertes, we wish to stray away from what most paleo-documentaries like to turn their attention to, giving attention to the largest creatures to ever walk the earth, such as the lumbering sauropods or the ferocious carnivores. Though they do have importance in nature, they aren't the only animals to exist. Some smaller creatures have somehow found a way to survive. Despite their relatively defenseless looks and ways of acting on this island, they work in colonies and socialize with one another, cooperating with each other in order to survive this harsh world. But on the island of Isle Peña, where every other animal weighs hundreds of times these creatures' weight, and the threat of a declining water supply, how do these stegosaurus survive? Find out next time on La Cinco.